Talk about coordination failure now. Coordination failure is such an interesting topic, uh, both for microeconomics and macroeconomics. We have so many examples, and let's start with definition. The definition of coordination failure is a situation where individuals or groups fail to achieve the best possible outcome because they fail to coordinate their decisions. Okay, that's the definition. So they're not in the best outcome. They might be in worse outcome than the best outcome. They're not in a good situation. It is possible to improve their situation. However, they're failing to do so because of lack of coordination, lack of communication, lack of central authority, or lack of the method of communication. We have many examples. Let's start with first example. Fire happens in a crowded room and everyone tries to run at the same time. They're probably gonna bump into each other, right? There's only one door. There's fire happening. There are, let's say, 200 people. Right? There are 200 people. They all want to survive from the fire. They all want to escape from the fire. They're gonna run in. Uh, they're gonna run to the one door that room has, and they will try to go out. But because everyone tries to escape at the same time, they're gonna bump into each other. They're gonna get injured, and only few of them will end up actually running away from that fire. Right? You can easily imagine that. That is coordination failure, because they're failing to achieve the best possible outcome. Because of lack of coordination. And the one feature of coordination failure is that no one has incentive to unilaterally change their decision. In other words, everyone's acting rationally on an individual level. There's no person in this situation who's acting irrationally, meaning that they don't have incentive to reverse their decision or do other things. So in this case, everyone's being rational. You want to be the first one, or you want to be out of that room with a fire as soon as possible, as quickly as possible. That is It is rational to do so, and it is rational to 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 run to that door and try to be the first one to go out. It is rational to do so, and it would be rational, on the other hand, to reverse that action, stop or change what you're doing, which is you can probably change your mind and stay silent and stop moving and just wait beside that door until everyone goes out. You can make that decision in a room where there are 100 people, 500 people, or 200 people. You can do that, but that is not rational, right? Because uh, it is likely that that person who is very gentle and wait for other people, that person will be the first one to probably die because of that fire. So it is not rational to do that. It is rational to try to go to that door and get out of that room. Um, However, it is not best outcome. Individual level, they're acting rationally, but collectively, they're not being rational, because the best outcome would be that they can coordinate, and they can impose rules, such as, like, young children and women should go out first, and a healthy young man should go at the end. Maybe elderly people, old people can go out first. They can change. They can decide that rule. They can agree to that rules, and they can determine that order. So more people uh, will end up escaping that room without pushing each other, without bumping into each other, without getting injured in the process of going out. And more people would end up getting out of that room. So that will be the successful coordination. That is the best outcome that they can achieve just by communicating to each other. But when they have 500 people, sometimes it's really hard. So that's why they stay in this coordination failure. And the coordination failure tends to continue. It's a type of equilibrium where um, no one has incentive to change their decision unilaterally. So that's gonna continue. So the situation where people push each other, they punch each other to be the first one to go out, that will continue, unfortunately. So that is coordination failure. Other example is everyone keeps standing in a K-pop concert when they can all sit down. Let's say they're all chairs. They're chair. Each of them have a chair. They can sit down to see their favorite artists, favorite idols, their singers and dancers, and they can enjoy their performance by sitting down. However, let's say one person starts standing up, so the people behind them would probably stand up too, because otherwise they're not going to be able to see their favorite members. Um, and it's going to end up that everyone will stand up, right? That is coordination failure. Because on an individual level, they're not acting irrationally; they're acting rationally. It is rational to stand up when people in front of you stand up, and it will be irrational to sit down when everyone is standing up. So you're not gonna see your favorite, TXT BTS and Hypen, whatever the K-pop groups that you like. That would be unfortunate. That would be irrational. That would be a stupid decision to sit down when everyone else is standing up. So it apply this definition will, or this characteristics of coordination failure will apply here, right? No one has incentive to unilaterally change their decision. However, they can collectively, uh, those five, let's say 5,000 people in the K-pop concert can collectively agree to each other to achieve the better outcome, the best possible outcome, which is that everyone should probably sit down. No one should stand up. Everyone keeps standing, so each of them will uh, be able to watch their favorite uh, K-pop groups dancing and singing, doing their performance. They can see that, so they're not going to be exhausted. They're not going to be exhausted either because standing up for 3 hours, 5 hours would probably be very tiring. That is not the best outcome. So the best outcome is to sit down and uh, uh, be restful and still enjoy the concert. So that is best outcome, but that is not possible when there are 5,000 people and there's no communication or coordination. Yeah, so people gonna end up standing up. But if there is coordination, such as like I think the organizer can make rules such as that you're not allowed to stand up during the concert. If you stand up, you're gonna get out of the concert. You have to be kicked out of the concert, something like that. In that case, people will collectively make their decision to not stand up and keep sitting down, and that will be the better outcome, the best outcome, I would say. Um, the other example, mutual love but fear of rejection prevents both of them from confessing their feelings to each other. So, and on an individual level, they're just simply responding to the fears. The fears that you might get rejected and might go into mental breakdown and feel depressed for the rest of the month, something like that. You have that fear, so you stay calm and you don't confess to the person who you love, although that person also loves you back too. So it is rational to respond to fears that you have because you don't want to be depressed for the rest of your year, month, whatever. However, collectively, they're obviously failing to achieve the best outcome because what would be the best outcome collectively? Both of them should confess to each other so they can start dating and be happy, right? So lack of coordination prevents them from achieving the best possible outcome, which is to uh, love each other and start dating. Yeah. And bank runs. This is more. Oh, sorry, I skipped one example. This is more like an economics. This feels like more relevant to actual economics ideas examples, but expansion of military budget in a region. Um, we can and it can apply to anywhere. But let's say Asia, right? Japan, China, like especially East Asia. Let's say South Korea, North Korea, China, Japan, Taiwan. We have all these countries. We have Mongolia too. And let's say one country, one of them starts spending more on military, and as a response to that, other countries would also increase their military budget. And this is going to continue like a cycle. They're going to increase and increase and increase their military capacity. They spend more and more money on military, buy missiles, invent more rockets and weapons and things like that, right? And collectively, that is not the best outcome. But on an individual level, they're acting rationally. It is rational to prepare more when your neighbor is having more missiles and military against you, right? However, collectively, the best outcome is that China, South Korea, Japan, Taiwan, all these countries shake hands and agree to each other that they're not going to buy missiles against targeting your neighbor. They can agree to that, so they're going to shrink their military budget altogether, so they're going to have more money left to spend on other things that directly improve the living standards of citizens in that country. They can spend that money on more like education or schools, healthcare. They can use that money to subsidize housing or subsidize agriculture products so people can, you know, eat more rice, whatever, something like that. That would be better use of money for citizens, right? Like, however, they're failing to do that because they cannot trust each other. Coordination often happens because they don't know about each other, they don't communicate enough, or they don't fully trust each other, right? Uh, yeah, same for all these other examples that I mentioned. Like, they can't, well, on an individual level, you can probably make decisions to, for example, shrink their military budget. Japan can cut their military budget alone, unilaterally. They can unilaterally make that decision. However, it would be quite irrational when your neighbors have a lot of rockets against you, right? You can. This could be more like a political debate, so I'm not gonna get too much deep into that. People can argue that military budget is just inherently bad. You should cut military budget no matter what other countries are doing. That's a political debate, not necessarily economics. Uh, yes. So they cannot trust each other. Same for this. Those two people who love each other, secretly love each other, they don't fully know each other, right? They don't fully know what the other one is gonna respond. So they're gonna end up just staying uh, silent. Same as this. There are like 5,000 people in K-pop concert. You cannot trust each other. You cannot trust other rest of the people around you. So you sitting down in a K-pop concert would probably not lead to other people sitting down all together with you. So you're not going to do that, right? But if there's trust, or if there's communication, or if there's mutual agreement, then they can achieve that. Bank runs is a very good example. Bank runs happen. It used to happen more often, I guess, but we had that in 2008 financial crisis. We also had that in Great Depression, and we also had that in Mary Poppins, the famous musical movie from Britain, England, I guess. So bank run is basically a situation where people run to banks to withdraw their money with the fear of bankruptcy of that banks, and other people follow, and it's gonna actually lead to the bankruptcy of the bank because people all withdraw their money, and if people withdraw their money, the banks cannot sustain their business. The banks is private banks are running their business by you know encouraging those households to save their money in their bank accounts so they can use their money to the banks can use that money to lend it to the banks can lend that money to other businesses and get some interest rate, and yeah, they can make the profit based on that. But if everyone withdraw their savings, if all the household withdraw their savings, the banks can obviously have no money left to lend to that business, so they're gonna bankrupt, and they're even gonna fail to return the deposit, the money that some households have handed in. So that would be tragedy, and it is a coordination failure because, first of all, collectively they're failing to achieve the best outcome. The best outcome is that all these households, stay calm and do not run to banks to withdraw significant portion of your savings. They shouldn't do that altogether, right? In this case, the banks will not bankrupt because banks can keep their savings and keep their business, sustain their business. That will be the best outcome. And it is such a bad outcome that everyone runs to banks and withdraw their money and fails the banks. However, on an individual level, just like every other coordination failure examples, on an individual level, they're acting rationally. No one's being irrational. It is rational to run to your banks when other people are running to banks and withdrawing their money because this banks, at some point, these banks might fail, right? And you don't want to keep your money on the banks that might fail because you're probably going to lose a lot of your money savings, which is horrible. So it's rational to run to banks and withdraw your money, withdraw all of your savings. And just like this, no one has the incentive to unilaterally change their decision. On an individual case, on an individual level, you can decide to not run to banks, and that is irrational. That is a rational decision because you're gonna be the one who loses all of your saving. So this is the best example of one of the best example of coordination failure. Collectively, they're failing to achieve the best outcome. On an individual level, they have no incentive to change that decision, which is to run to banks and withdraw your money because you don't want to be the one who lose savings. Economic recession is another example, a very, very, very good example, amazing example of coordination failure. Especially, I'm talking more about the recession driven by lack of aggregate demand. 2008 financial crisis, Great Depression, and we have so many other. I think the U.S. economy experienced like about 14 or 13 or 12 recessions um, after World War II, and most of them are driven by lack of demand. So what happens in recession is that all these households are really scared about their future. they don't have good prospect for their future, so they're gonna save because they're actually really scared of getting unemployed tomorrow. So it is rational decision to save more, right? It is kind of irrational to spend a bunch of their money on fun things and luxurious things when you might get unemployed or when you're already unemployed. Yeah, so it is rational to defer their spending and spend less and save more and kind of like stop spending much of money on entertainments and luxury things or leisure or something like that. It is rational on an individual level, but collectively that is stupid decision because when you don't spend, when consumers and households don't spend, uh, firms gonna get less revenue and they're gonna be forced to make the decision to shrink their business, shrink their production. So they're gonna fire a bunch of people because that's what they have to do when people don't buy stuffs, right? The business is gonna have little profit. They're gonna see the profit shrinking. They're gonna see the revenue shrinking. They have to realize that okay, we have to cut down production. We have to produce less services and less goods because people are not buying much. In this case, firms will fire people. So we're gonna have more and more unemployed uh, people in the economy, which will lead to further recession because unemployed people will not buy much stuffs because they don't have income. They're so scared of future. They're gonna save more, things like that. Um, so that is coordination failure because individual level they're making a good decision. They're making rational decision, and it would be irrational to reverse that decision, which is to you know go out and travel and buy expensive stuffs and eat so many different luxury food when you are unemployed or when you're about to be unemployed. That is stupid decision. So no one, well, some people might do that, but most of the households won't do that. They're gonna defer their spending. They're gonna cut down their spendings. But collectively, that will lead to further recession. That will lead to higher unemployment, and that will lead to stagnated wage growth, things like that. It is horrible. That is coordination failure because coordination is what it takes to improve their situation. The best outcome is that they don't do that. They don't do such thing as deferring their spending. They should all collectively agree to each other to go out and spend all of your money tomorrow and buy a lot of things, travel, buy cars, buy housing, all these things. They should all do this at the same time if they can collectively agree to each other. In this case, firms going to see more revenues. Firms going to realize that they have to expand their production. They're going to hire more people. Unemployment will go down. The wages will go up. This will happen just by coordinating to each other. That will be coordination success. However, there are so many households in the economy. It's kind of really hard to coordinate to each other to collectively go out and spend each other. And if they do that on an individual level, that's not gonna be a good idea because you're gonna lose money and the economy will still be in a recession and you might get unemployed tomorrow. Yes. And the last example, my favorite one. Well, we have way more examples from macroeconomics and microeconomics, but this is like typical ones that I'm going to explain today. I'm going to talk about microeconomics example of coordination failure another time. But let me just finish with inflation. Inflation is can be defined by price level of the economy going up. So the price of goods and services going up. That's inflation, right? Um, it can be coordination failure because when price goes up, what would you do? You're gonna feel scared that it's gonna continue to go up, so you're gonna rush in their spending, right? When you see the price of rice, the staple of Japanese households, price of rice going up, it is rational to run to supermarket and buy all these rice before the price goes up furthermore. It is rational to do so. On an individual level, it is rational to do so. However, everyone does that, so the price of rice will go up furthermore. It's gonna go up by like 10%, maybe tomorrow, the day after, it's gonna go up by 20% because everyone keeps buying rice. Um, all these households just rush to buy rice. So inflation will lead to further inflation, and this will continue, and the price will go up and up and up, and that's going to erode their saving, because when price of rice and other things that you typically buy go up, the value of your saving that you have been making over the course of years and long time, decades, will be eroded. The value of those savings will be eroded because the purchasing power of money goes down when price goes up, right? That is horrible outcome for all, right? Collectively, it is a tragedy because the price of it is tragedy that the value of your saving just keeps going down drastically, uh, because cost of living just continues to rise quite rapidly, right? So collectively, the best outcome is that they agree to each other to not rush to buy rice or vegetables or furniture, whatever that households buy. They should agree to each other. They don't rush. So the price inflation will probably be curbed. They will slow down, and the price will not continue to rise too rapidly. Yeah. So this is only possible by coordination, and that will be the best outcome. But again, just like any other coordination failure examples, on an individual level, they cannot do that. On an individual level, it is rational to run to supermarkets and buy as much as possible before price goes up further. So this is, yeah. So the both recession and inflation can be good examples of coordination failure, and coordination is what it takes to improve this situation. But coordination is not always easy. Sometimes government needs to do that. The third party needs to do that, or uh, or they should probably form a way to communicate. But especially for macro example like inflation and recession, it is really it's really difficult for thousands and millions of households agree to each other to do one thing, which is to, for example, not rush to the supermarket or to uh, uh, start spending all of their income on goods and services that they wanted to buy. It is really hard to agree because they cannot trust each other, and yeah. So that is coordination failure, and that's it. I'm gonna probably talk more about coordination failure in other videos, but because it's such an important concept and relevant concept, both for micro and macro. But thank you so much.